In this video we're going to be taking a look at the error where we are accessing MySQL data through a query and we have the error supplied argument is not a valid MySQL result resource returned. So if we get an error that sort of looks like that or sounds like that, it almost always means that your query is malformed, so the SQL is incorrect. Now in this example I have a database called errors, owing to the name of the tutorial, and then I have a table called names. Now inside of this table you can see that I've got two columns, one is name ID and one is name. The name ID just corresponds to the unique number that's auto incremented for each record that's added, and then we just have a name next to that. Now what we're going to be doing is within our script we're going to be connecting to our database, which I've already done, or connecting to our server, which I've already done, connecting to our database, which I've already done, and just down here we're going to go ahead and use the mysql query function to return first of all a specific name and then a list of names. And we're going to take a look at the errors that are returned and see how we can sort of go and pinpoint these and resolve them. And there's a couple of ways that we can display errors as well, particularly if you have error reporting turned off for any reason. Okay, so the first thing to do after I've connected, I've just basically connected to localhost, which is the server name, with the user root and no password, and I've selected the database errors, which we saw earlier I'd created just here. So let's go ahead and create our first query. I'm going to assign this query to the variable name. So mysql query, and then I'm going to create the correct SQL first of all, but essentially what we're doing here is we're just returning the textual name based on its unique ID. So for example, if I wanted to pick out the name that corresponds to the ID of 1, that would be Alex. So essentially what we're doing here is we want to return Alex onto the screen. So the query would go as follows. We would select name from names, that's the name of our table, and then I want to say where name underscore ID equals 1, and notice 1 doesn't need single quotes around it because it's an integer. Okay, so in this case the MySQL query will have returned the value Alex. However, we obviously need to use MySQL result, a function like MySQL result, to actually display this. So let's go ahead and in our browser let's refresh just to see if we have any errors, and you can see that I've refreshed the page and we don't have any errors. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to create or echo out MySQL result, and I'm going to take the result from the query name at row 0, so the first row, and we're taking the field, the value at field name. So what this is essentially doing is just echoing out Alex. So now when we refresh, you see we've got the value Alex here. Now if for any reason my query was malformed, I'd accidentally say missed out a single quotation mark or something like that, when I refresh you can see that we've got this error. Now the error comes from the MySQL result function, and it said supplied argument is not a valid MySQL result resource, and it tells us what line this error is on. Now obviously this is on line 6 because we're trying to access the information from this query name, which is on line 5. So it doesn't actually mean that our error is on line 6, it means that our error is on line 5 because we're accessing this query that we've assigned to the value name or the variable name. So that's a quick tip about how to pinpoint out that specific error. Now we want to take a look at if we have error reporting turned off. Now if you did have error reporting turned off, you might not retrieve this error because this is in fact a PHP warning that comes from the MySQL result function. So what we can use is just after here we can say or die, and this is an extremely useful way of pinpointing out which queries that might have gone wrong. We can say or die, and inside of here we can use the MySQL error function, and that'll essentially just return the equivalent error, but that's the error that's been returned by MySQL itself. So let's go ahead and refresh, and you can see that we've killed the script. So this error here hasn't actually occurred yet because we've died at the end of here, and we're echoing out the MySQL error. and it says here incorrect table name names. So the reason that this is because you can see we missed out the last single quotation mark here, and therefore it's taken from the next one, it's taken names where as the table name. So you really need to carefully analyze these errors, because obviously this error doesn't make sense, because we're obviously not selecting from a table called names where, but obviously the reason for this error is because it's assumed that the table name starts here and then the table name ends here, because we haven't included this single quotation mark. So now obviously when I go ahead and refresh, we get this value up here. Even though we've created this die here, it will still continue because OR is obviously a logical operator. So if this query has failed, we will die, otherwise we won't, and we'll sort of continue on with the rest of the script. So if you are having trouble with this error, take a look at which query, which line this comes from, and then take a look at what query you're actually using in this way. Now we're also going to take a look at using this in a loop. So for example, let's just go ahead and just get rid of this echo down here, and let's go ahead and get rid of, in fact we'll keep that. If we wanted to loop through all of the results, we've selected name from names where ID equals 1, so we can go ahead and get rid of this. This query as follows will actually select all of the names. So you might be familiar with a while loop, and inside a while loop we can obviously loop through the results taken from this query. So we can say while name row equals mysql fetch assoc, which is fetching an associative array of the data, and we can loop through to return each result from that query. And obviously we just go ahead and pop the query name in there. We can then go ahead and echo name row and then name, which is obviously the field name. So name row is now a new variable, and we can use that to access this through every single result that we retrieve from here. So let's just go ahead and put a line break at the end of that. Not semantically correct, but we're just for readability. You see that this has retrieved all of the results from our database table. Now in the case that this query fails, we'll have a similar result, however the error will be returned from mysql fetch associative instead of mysql result as we saw previously. So let's just go ahead and say select name from names, and let's just do more or less the same thing and just get rid of one of them single quotation marks. When we refresh, oh, it's worked because it's at the end of the thing, at the end of the string. But in the case that we're doing it like this, let's go ahead and now refresh. It now says you have an error in your SQL syntax, check the manual, blah blah blah. So in this case we know that the error, this error that we're being returned is by using die mysql error. But if we didn't have this in here, we would retrieve pretty much the same error that we've seen before, supplied argument is not a valid mysql result resource, blah blah blah, but this time it originates from mysql fetch associative. So really this is the part that you need to look out for. Regardless of which function it comes from, it will almost always mean that your query is malformed. Now in the case that your query isn't malformed, we can take a look at an example. For example, select name from names where surname equals Garrett. Now essentially what this would do is it would select all of the names from the database where the field name surname equals Garrett. Now in this case we don't actually have a field called surname, and therefore we will still return an error. So when we go ahead and refresh our index.php page, you see that we get exactly the same warning. Now the problem here is that our syntax is fine, the query looks okay, but obviously we can't find this field here. So this is where or die mysql error comes in handy, because we can actually check what the specific error is. Especially if you're creating long queries or queries that you'd quite don't understand yet if you're just learning, then MySQL error is going to be extremely useful to you to pinpoint these errors. So now when we refresh, it says unknown column surname in where clause. So basically we are using a where clause here to say where surname equals Garrett, but because this field name doesn't exist, or column doesn't exist, it will give us a more specific error. So in terms of SQL and MySQL, it's going to give us a bit more, it's going to make a bit more sense, the errors that were actually returned. So using or die MySQL error is extremely useful. So that just about concludes that specific error. Obviously using or die MySQL error is not recommended during runtime, so once you've fixed and resolved your error, it's most probably appropriate to actually remove it, just so you don't have lots of or dies in your code. So we've removed that now and we know what the error was, so we're just going to go ahead and remove that. And then obviously we have a working query, and all of our code in PHP is fine as well.